This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 504, The Marketplace. On today's show, we are talking about the Drupal Marketplace, how the community is reacting, and what the working group is finding with our guest, Tiffany Farriss. We'll also cover Views CSV Source as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Tiffany Farriss. Tiffany is the CEO and co-owner of Palantir.net. With almost 30 years of technical consulting experience, Tiffany serves her team and her clients through strategic and agile mentoring, facilitation, and coaching. Her work currently focuses on creating sustainable environments that enable high-performing, diverse teams to solve complex problems. Tiffany has served on the board of directors of the Drupal Association for over 13 years. Welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on.
I'm Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are, as usual, John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM,
Hello, internet friends.
and also joining us for the next 4 weeks as guest host, Nora Medlin, director of delivery and program operations at Bluefly.io. Nora is the mid-camp lead organizer and director of delivery and program operations at Bluefly.io. Tech Nora brings her technical program and process improvement expertise as a certified safe agilist in CSSGB. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Good to be here.
And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a senior solutions architect at Aqua and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to present data within your Drupal website that comes from a CSV flat file without having to import that data into your Drupal database? There's a module for that. It's called Views CSV Source, and it was created in March of 2024 by Daniel Cothran of JSI. I met Daniel at MidCamp earlier this week, and he was emphatic that his colleague and co-maintainer, Nia Cathoni, deserves significant credit. Now, it does have a 1.0.11 version available, which works with Drupal 8.8, 9, 10, and 11. It is actively maintained. In fact, the latest release was just last month. It has security and test coverage. And for documentation, there is a pretty robust README on how to get started. The module does have 4 open issues, none of which are bugs. And according to Drupal.org, it's officially in use by 56 sites. Now, with Views CSV Source installed, you can create a view that uses a CSV as a source instead of the Drupal site's data. You can point to a file within your site's file system, or it can be remotely hosted. If the file requires authentication for access, it is also possible to include encoded credentials in a header. Now, you can use CSV fields to specify the columns you want to pull into the view, and you can use the group by to specify data sets to represent, for example, to plot as lines in a chart. You can also create filters either as a CSV field that acts as a standard text filter, or a CSV field options filter that creates a dropdown of all the unique values in a specified column. Your assembled data can then be shown in tables or charts and can be manipulated using standard view configuration or using contributed modules like View's simple math field. The module also comes with sort and contextual filter plugins, and I was impressed by a demo of Views CSV Source in a lightning talk at MidCamp yesterday. We'll see if we can get a link in the show notes. So I thought it would be fun to talk about today. So let's talk about Views CSV Source.
This sounds amazing and terrifying at the same time. I mean, just the way that, yes, it's CSV, but the way that Excel just mangles CSVs, and we know everybody's going to be using Excel or Google Sheets to modify them. It it just terrifies me. What what's the validation look like?
Yeah, I can't say I've looked too much into the validation aspect of it specifically. I have to imagine that the cleaner your CSV is to start with, the more reliably it'll work. But it sounds like there's been quite a bit of work that's gone into it. So I imagine that it must have some ability to handle things that may come from suspect sources. But yeah, it would be interesting to hear from anybody who's used it in that kind of use case specifically.
I wonder, like, to Nick's point, like one of my thoughts while you were describing this was like, can you get like a flat URL from Google Docs to be able to just use your Google Docs sheet as a CSV, and then you don't have to actually have like an Excel file. I mean, I guess you could if you really wanted to. But the other thing there too is like, I'm happy to note that they have the authentication piece figured out and the ability to kind of lock this down a little bit, because it feels like it could be a little bit of a security issue if you just have a CSV file living somewhere that powers content on your website. I guess I'm wondering more about the views integration. Like, does it pull in the headers and stuff so that you can use like views filters and things to be able to filter your content?
Yes, and in fact,
Mm.
you can expose filters using the filters that we described, so it can actually pull out all of the unique values in a particular column and then make those kind of a drop down, so it's easy for users to be able to
Mm.
select from the values in the actual data set that way.
Oh, that's very cool.
I mean,
Int-
there is a use case for this. Like I feel like I would want to use this in like internal, like almost as a go between for like importing the data into like Tableau or something. Like you have some pre-built charts and you just need to really quickly filter some stuff in a way, but you don't want them doing it all in Excel. You don't want to import the data yet because it's not final. But I have questions.
Yeah. Well, the other use case I've run across is customers who have data sets that they manage elsewhere.
yeah.
And there isn't always a lot of value in just bringing that into Drupal, either as, a custom table or just having it, sort of duplicated on the Drupal site and then having to sync data back and forth between. So oftentimes, if those systems can just dump a flat file and then you can display it in a nice way within the Drupal site, I think there's a lot of value there. In the
Mm.
past, when I came across a similar requirement, I was looking at sort of JavaScript based ways to sort of ingest some kind of a flat file and then within JavaScript do a similar thing, but to have the power of views, I think is going to be pretty
Yeah.
valuable for the community.
I, I suspect the real use case is, having not read the full issue or the full project page, is more unique columns. Because honestly, writing a flat migration of from CSV to a custom table isn't a huge burden. But if you have to do it for somebody who's capable of writing the views plugin to, you know, I mean, for a site builder, yeah, that might be a pretty big ask. But for somebody who's capable of writing a module like this, it's not that much of a leap to say putting that into a table play isn't hard. But I bet you this is more about having dynamic columns and content and being able to test there. Because having something generic that can import an arbitrary number of columns with arbitrary content somewhere and then build views on top of it is probably a lot harder than doing this. So you just point at the CSV, identify the column types, set up those exposed filters, and then you can kind of create those charts just in the views UI. And again, very powerful, very it would take a lot to convince me by a client that this is something useful, but man, it does feel like it really
Uh,
solves that edge case
I
really
mean,
well.
I think it's a pretty easy sell for a client to tell me that this is useful, because I used to work for a healthcare system, and they had a lot of legacy systems that like did not have APIs and did not have easy ways of getting into the data, but the data needed to be available on their intranet, which was a Drupal based site, right? So like right there I see like a very easy, to Martin's point, way to kind of like sync data from that external system into their Drupal intranet that people would need to be able to provide dosing instructions or whatever it may be. So I definitely see a very useful use case. That sounds like bad English, but I'm going to go with it for this, this module from the integration standpoint, with other systems, or just in reality, like bringing data into an intranet or into a site that you're managing.
Yeah, I think the other thing they mentioned on the project page is that there's actually a performance benefit because
Hmm.
running all of the data through Drupal, if you have a large data set, can actually be fairly slow, whereas ingesting a flat file can be much faster for
Hmm.
PHP. And I've heard from an accessibility standpoint is that if you're presenting charts, oftentimes what they say is the best practice for people who are using assistive technologies is to really make the raw data available. And so with this kind of an approach, it's really easy to have both the visual chart as well as the flat file that is based on, available in kind of, a single display as well.
So for this is a dumb question, and I apologize. Like we're not loading this data through the database in Drupal, so it's being loaded at time of display on the front end.
Yeah, directly from the CSV.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. All right. That makes
But
sense.
then obviously using caching and all those other,
So it is
things.
getting stored in the Drupal cache to make it faster.
Well, depending on how you configure the view,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or maybe your CDN, depending on what you're using or how that's
Mm.
set up, right? Okay. So okay,
Totally.
that makes sense. Got it.
Well, I have to say, it's good to be back. We did have. I didn't really. We didn't mention this at the top, but this is our first episode back in a couple of weeks, so it's good to have you back, Martin. This is a great module to start off the in the 500s, I guess, for going forward. I'm definitely gonna have to keep an eye on this. Like I said, it feels very niche when you personally. I would, like John said, it feels like an internet type of project. But yeah, very very cool. So, Martin, if listeners wanted to connect with you or wanted to suggest a module of the week, what's the best way for them to do that?
We are always happy to talk about candidates for module of the week or even just interesting modules in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack. Or folks can reach out to me directly as Man Clue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
Great. See you next week.
See you then.
All right. So let's move on to our primary topic. So, Tiffany, let's start with the high level. Maybe not everyone has listened to the most recent Dries note and don't know quite what it is, but what's the idea behind the Drupal marketplace? What is the Drupal marketplace?
I think it's a really simple idea. It's to create a trusted place on Drupal.org where contributors can list and distribute very high quality, ready to launch Drupal site templates. Now, site templates is something new. No one's actually seen it yet. They're in the process of defining it for Drupal CMS, but you can think of them as composer templates that bundle an experience builder theme plus obviously Drupal CMS and then additional recipes and demo content. So the idea is that this would help new users really get started fast and with confidence. I think one of the things I have been saying a lot to folks about it is to think of the site templates as a starter kit. That aside from the theme, everything else that's in the starter kit is intended for one time use, which recipes themselves are intended for one time use as well. So that's the idea. It's not new. There are lots of marketplaces, other places, but Drupal's never had one. So this is an opportunity for us to learn from what's been done other places and to really define how that can be done well and in a way that's very aligned with Drupal in our community.
I like the idea or the terminology of a starter kit because like originally I was like, oh, site templates are like themes plus plus, right?
Right.
And I'm like, that seems like kind of like not a great way to describe it. But like the idea of a starter kit where it's a theme plus one-time use recipes and content make a lot of sense, a lot more sense to me, I guess I should say. So we have this idea of a marketplace. We have this idea of the marketplace being a place to have a collection of site templates, and we'll get into whether we sell those or don't sell those, or how that marketplace works throughout the episode. But I'm wondering if you can tell me, you're currently leading a working group around this initiative, and I'm wondering if you can tell me what the goals of that working group are.
So our goal is to figure out how a marketplace might work socially, how it might work technically, and how it might work financially. The idea is that certainly in the Dries note, Dries put this forward as an idea, but he was also really clear to say that we needed the buy-in of the community. We needed to explore this more before we decided to commit to it. So what we've been calling the go, no go decision. So what we're doing as the marketplace working group is we're really doing deep research in the community and incorporating, you know, lots of different channels of feedback. We've got surveys, we have Slack prompts every week, we have, you know, competitive analysis research. We're talking to the IP lawyers. There's just so many different components of this. And what we're doing is we're trying to bring that all together to draft a governance, to draft some quality standards, to draft what the contributor workflows might be, and explore business models so that we can determine if this is actually something we want to invest in. Right? Every time you choose something, you are choosing not to do other things. So we want to make sure that this is the right next step, both for the community and for the association.
And you said something interesting. Well, you said a lot of interesting things there. But one thing that I wanted to get a little more information on is, you said you were putting out Slack prompts. What is that? And like, is it yeah, obviously it's something in Slack, but like, how is that being used?
So I have this master roadmap of all of the different kinds of questions that we need to answer. And each week I have a theme for what we're looking at. And I want to go to people where they're at. I want to meet them where they're at. So,
Mm,
we go to the Drupal certified partner quarterly meeting to get some feedback and initial insight on their hopes and fears. And then we know a lot of the most engaged folks in the Drupal community are on Drupal Slack. So we created a channel. It's pound Drupal CMS marketplace. And every Monday I post just a prompt so that I can watch a conversation emerge between folks and solicit kind of a candid opinion about what those different topics are. And they're getting much more specific as time goes on. So I think while I have a roadmap, it's an agile roadmap. So it changes over time based on what I'm hearing. And so the Slack prompts have been, I, I drafted an initial list of about 15. And already by week 5, I had started to change what I was asking based on the feedback we're getting and what I was seeing in those surveys.
got it. So the prompt is really a question or a talking point topic that you want to kind of gauge community thoughts and opinions on, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this week's prompt, just to give you an example, or like, so,
Yeah.
this will be the old prompt, but you're still welcome actually to answer any of the prompts. They're all still up there and we're capturing and coding them. But so the prompt for the week that we're recording this is, what makes a site template worth paying a premium for, despite the fact
Mm,
that it's GPL and one-time use? So we want to really start to dig in on
oh
where we
man.
would be generating value.
I have a great answer for that one. I'll have to go find that prompt. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like, anyway, we're going to go down rabbit holes here. Yeah, so I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that you guys are doing great work in including the community and making this really a community driven initiative. And I think it's important because it's kind of a big topic, right?
It is. It represents a big change potentially for our community. So a lot of this is, I think the technical pieces, once we know what we want to do, like those are again going to be the easy part. Figuring out what we should do and how we should do those things, that's the tough part. So we want to be really thoughtful about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that. And kind of maybe digging into that a little bit more, I think we're curious to hear why you think that the Drupal marketplace is important to the sustainability or, the continuation of Drupal CMS and the product in general.
There's a really short answer to that. It's because we need to lower the barrier to entry for Drupal. Right? We want to grow the number of people who consider Drupal, who get started with Drupal, And a marketplace, we think, can help us get those new users started faster. But we also think it can help to reduce the cost and the complexity for agencies. And we think it can give contributors a channel to showcase and monetize their work. So that's why the Starshot leadership team, said, we think a marketplace might be really good. Then independently, the Drupal Association, which is tasked with maintaining the infrastructure of the project, Drupal.org, and all of our technical infrastructure, we're interested in what are the ways that we can strengthen the sustainability of the platform, right? We provide a lot of services. It's about $10 for every Drupal site in the world. The Drupal Association funds infrastructure to support them. And we don't talk about the fact that there's a cost to it.
Mm.
So part of the reason that I came back for a second term on the board was to think about how we might make that more sustainable. And this is a conversation that's really broad, and a lot of open source communities are wrestling with it. There's going to be a conference at the United Nations next month specifically focused on how we think about funding and supporting digital public infrastructure in a more sustainable way. So I'm looking for those opportunities that create these mutual wins where we're adding value for users, we're adding value for our contributors that we depend on, we are nurturing our ecosystem, but that also are self-supporting, because every time we add new sites, we are adding $10 worth of cost and services to Drupal.org. So I need to think
Mm.
about how we can do that in a way that's actually sustainable.
Well, and I think maybe just to expand on that a little bit, I wonder if you're able to dig into this. I don't know, but my thoughts go to immediately, what percentage cut maybe would come out of a sale on the marketplace. Has any sort of little discussions happened yet with those probing questions in the Slack channel about how the sort of monetization piece would flow back to Drupal Association in that regard?
We haven't had those specific discussions yet around those percentages, but I think they're well known. So we've done an inventory of how other marketplaces work. And in general, 20 to 30% goes back to whoever's providing the platform. So I think more interestingly for Drupal, we've been having conversations around, all right, well, you have the site template creator who would get some revenue, but what about upstream, the folks who actually made the modules without which the site template doesn't work? What would be fair? So the community is very concerned about the questions of fairness in that. And, I think what's been interesting, our most recent survey really started to dig into that. What do people think about? And I don't see a consensus around paying back module maintainers, but maybe paying forward. And some of the revenue that's brought in going into a module innovation or sustainability fund or something like that. But there was a lot of concern around it. And so I think there's a couple of ideas that are floating around there for how we might make sure that as Drupal grows and when these site templates are wildly successful, that we're not overwhelming our module maintainers and our contributors with increased support burdens that are uncompensated, right? So I think there's such care in the community around the nuance involved in these issues.
Go ahead, Nick. I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, I just want to. I'm not sure if people have talked about this either, but one thing that's been on my mind too, beyond, I mean that's one of the primary things that I think about is how do you equitably make sure that some of that flows uphill and make sure that like there's all sorts of things like, hey, there's 10 maintainers on a project, but only two of them are active, or there's all sorts of questions. But we also want to make sure that some of it also goes. We also want to think about um, ancillary projects, right? So, for example, DDEV, the Drupal Association has been doing a huge thing for DDEV, putting a banner, mentioning the need to support DDEV. But most contrib modules, maintainers and developers use it too. And having some percentage for or like PHP itself or Twig or like all the tools that we're building on top of, having a way to support those projects through an initiative like this, I think is worth keeping in mind too. Obviously, these these aren't things that we can solve at this point, but I think it's important to have a strong plan for how they'll get resolved before money gets involved.
I
Otherwise,
I I I both agree and disagree. So I think this is a great question that or follow-up question that Nora asked, right? I think that yes, things get more complicated when we start talking about money and how that money is divvied up. But I also think that, and I mean, Tiffany, I'd love to hear your thoughts or what you're hearing from the community in this regard. But like, we have to be able to get to a MVP. We have to be able to get to that first plateau of like, do we have a marketplace? What does it look like? Do we have paid site templates, right? And I think the first obligation is to what percentage of that fee, what's the fee breakdown of going back to the Drupal Association, going back to the creator of the site template, right? Because I think that's the, I don't want to say the most important thing here, but I think that should be the MVP, right? And then, from there, I mean, I think we can talk about and develop, some sort of fund to provide module maintainer sustainability. Definitely not opposed to that, but I feel like a lot of times what we do in the Drupal community, and this is more of a broad statement, is like, instead of getting to an MVP where we can build upon it, we talk and debate and discuss to the nth degree, and we then don't end up making progress, right? So I'd be interested, Tiffany, to hear kind of your thoughts around that and like what you're hearing from the community. But like that's kind of where I come down on this.
Yeah, no problem. The way that I'm approaching this is we're using a consent model. Is it good enough for now and safe enough to try? And
Mhm.
so when you approach things from that perspective, one of the things you think about are the harms. And that's essentially what we're talking about is are we causing harm with this? And ultimately, a lot of what drove the Starshot team to this conclusion that we needed a marketplace is that even if the things we're saying are true, right? That it creates additional burden on module maintainers, that harm isn't caused by the marketplace, that's caused by people using the software. So they're not changing the status quo of what that looks like. But it does create that opportunity that we might actually have resources to resolve that. So that in itself doesn't become the blocker. But what I love are the system signals that people are thinking about this because one, it assumes that this is going to be wildly successful. So, as someone who doesn't like to waste her time on things, I'm excited that people are just, prima facie jumping to the fact that this is going to be incredibly successful and we're going to create
Sure.
these huge, we're going to get heaps of money and we're going to cause, a lot more people to be using Drupal and show and the people who are, low code, no code users are going to be showing up in issue queues, which means that they've
Mhm.
gone up the hill of our engagement ladder. Like I'm loving how far down the success track people are going. But, I think the important part of it that I also take away is the first step to being able to solve some of these issues is to be talking about them, right? Sunshine is the best cure. So I think that we need to get clearer, and I'm trying to get clearer as a Drupal association by saying, did you realize that we're providing $10 of services to every site that uses Drupal around the world every year? I don't think people realize that.
Right.
And so when you talk about, what, hey, all of these modules on Drupal.org use DDEV, and this is the cost of that. When we start to bring those to the surface, that awareness allows us to start to think about the cost of the decisions that we're making, right? I think that,
Mm.
when we decided to do packages on Drupal.org, we didn't think about what that cost is and where that cost comes in. So I just am trying to create a model where we're starting to think about the cost, the human cost, the technical cost of what we're doing and making sure that we're thinking about it sustainably.
Before we move on, and I know we need to move on, but before we move on, I'm wondering, like, you just said the additional burden on a module maintainer, right? And I know that this is not going to be popular, so brace yourselves, folks. But I'm wondering, like, if there are 100, 1,000, tens of thousand more sites using Drupal, right? Does the do we have metrics that show how potentially how the burden on a module maintainer could change? And the reason I ask this is like, if you have a module and if it works, right? Yes, more sites using it means more issues in the issue queue that you have to kind of go through and triage. So like I definitely understand that aspect of it. But for me, it feels like the ecosystem that we're proposing has a couple of layers between the average site builder and the issue queue, right? So like you have the site template creator because that person's going to definitely be involved, or that agency is going to be involved, right, in supporting their site template. And then that obviously there'll be an interaction there with the module maintainer. I just wonder, like, if we added 10,000 more Drupal sites based on site templates, like, would a module maintainer really see that much more of an impact, or a workload, we'll say?
I would say, as somebody who does maintain modules, it will yes, because from a few sides. One, there'll be more activity in the issue queue. There will be more there, no, there's no question. There will be more activity
Well,
in the issue queue. There will be there will be increased pressure from just users of the module and the site template maintainers to fix things that they care about, which may be like right now, one of the things is you could put up a module and it, because it's free, because you whatever, if there's a bug that you don't care about, yeah, some people might post about it, but you can kind of just ignore it. But again, with all things, once money's involved, that pressure, like now it's somebody's job to complain about it.
And it
And
always has been.
well, yes, but it's
well,
different.
right. So that's where I always get to. Like, listen, module maintainers are doing it for free today, and people complain about bugs because they're building enterprise websites with this solution, right? So like a bug is a bug is a bug. Like if there is a bug, somebody's going to complain about it, whether it's now or after a marketplace.
So
The
socially, it's
way
very different, though. I think.
Okay. So, but like I guess my point here is that like let's build out this scenario, right? So like I'm a site builder. I pretend like I am not a community member. I do not know anything about the Drupal community, right? I'm a site builder. I say, hey, I'm going to go to company X. They have this great site template for Drupal that I want to use for my NGO, right? Okay, I buy this site template from this company X, and I install it on my website, and it works great. And I've set up my whole website, right, for my nonprofit. It uses web forms, right? Okay, I'm using web forms. I set up my web form. Oh, I find an issue, or I want a new feature in my web form, right? I'm probably going back to the site template creator, right? To say, "Hey, I want this new feature, this new thing. Can you help me? Can you help me build it? Can you add it to the site template? Whatever that conversation looks like, right?" Like at that point, the site template creator it may go back to Jacob Rockowitz, the maintainer of web form, and go, "Hey, somebody wants this feature. Like, can we add it?" Right? I would say that the site template creator is going to add that feature and provide it back to the module maintainer. Obviously, Jacob's got to review the code and incorporate the code if it makes sense for him, right? And there's conversations there. So I do see that happening, but like, I mean, he's probably having those conversations anyway, right? So like,
But if you look at the difference between the scale, like it's the scale. If you look at the difference in scale between a module that has 100 users versus 1,000 versus 10,000 versus 100,000, it's extreme. And I think the funds that they're planning on do, we're thinking about how we can use that to help solve that friction, right? That'd be a great problem to have. But there's a lot of social stigma against paid stuff, and there's a lot of there's a lot of easy missteps I think that can happen
Well,
with incorporating this back to the community.
sure. I mean, I don't disagree with that. And I think like we could talk about the cost and money aspect of this like for the rest of this episode and still not
Yeah, let's
come to a
what
consensus, right?
I I
But
do want
go ahead.
sorry, John. I do want to ask Tiffany one last thing about this before we move on. And it's not specifically about the cost, but you had mentioned something that I wanted to dive into, and it's something that Jacob mentioned on this is shameless self-promotion, but on the TD Cafe episode that he had with Martin, he had mentioned this, and it's had me thinking. So whenever you talk, you said people are thinking about the success, right? And very excited about that. The same thing is kind of true of Starshot, but you do have to think about the failure state too, right? And the thing is, I think about Drupal CMS, right? Drupal CMS, I think we could say at this point so far has been a resounding success, right? I think even in a world where it failed, though, let's just put on what's the opposite of rose tinted glasses? Let's pretend that we're in a world where Drupal CMS failed for whatever reason. I think the process still would have been a success for the community as a whole because it did something that Drupal hasn't seen in a long time, which is pulled all the different agencies together to talk about this is how we're using Drupal. These are things that we can do to fix. These are paper cuts that we fix on every project. Let's just fix it for everybody, right? Or even for somebody like me. Like I'm probably not going to use Drupal CMS as a starting point ever. Like it just isn't when you're building a custom site. But there's recipes and things and a lot of core stuff that got fixed that makes my life way better.
Wait a second.
Okay,
Time out there. Time out. If a client came to you and said, "This is a site template I want you to implement for
I
my
didn't say
site,"
site template. I said Drupal CMS.
but a site template's built based on Drupal CMS, right? So like,
No,
Yes.
only Drupal CMS. You can't apply the recipes to. Okay, then that's concerning. But let's set that aside for a second and get to my question. But yeah, no, I mean Drupal CMS has like 95 modules or 1,000 modules. Like I'm not going to be putting that on a client site. I don't want my job to change from adding the stuff we need to taking away the stuff we don't need. But anyway, maybe that will change in the future. My point here is that even if I don't use it, whether I use it or not, it's been a huge success and it's benefited me and my company. Like it's a benefit. It's a net positive, even if it goes away tomorrow. W- are you thinking about how to make sure that that happens with site templates? Because I feel like if site templates, if site templates were just a thing and didn't work out, I think everybody could accept that. If site templates get introduced and there's a paid marketplace, I think backing out of that and or managing the risk from that is much harder and much more potential to be divisive, I guess you could say. So how are you considering that failure state? Like how do you said you're talking about consent, you're talking about is this safe? Is there go no go? But how are you planning those mitigations? Because that's the thing that really concerns me more than how you split the money. The thing that concerns me is how do you handle kind of a rollback, I guess, for that because it feels different.
I want to make a distinction here. Site templates are happening. So that's not part of
Fair
this
enough.
marketplace conversation. So I can't speak to that. That's Starshot leadership team. The question about the marketplace, and I think what's implicit again, which I take as a system signal, is that they will be commercialized. That there will be like that we're going to take money for these things. There is a world or a future in which we put up the marketplace, and it's just a beautiful way to get your site templates. Do I think that there will be a charge for them? Most likely, I do. But we're still working through what that would look like. The question of if it is a failure, how would we know it's a failure and in what ways can it
Yeah.
fail? I'm a big believer in that kind of risk mitigation. And one of the things we've done in this process is we said, what are the assumptions? So we did some critical assumptions work around we're assuming certain things going into this project. What if we are wrong about those base assumptions? And how do we
Hmm.
mitigate those things? So I think risk mitigation at every step has been part of what we're thinking about and part of what I bring to the table in terms of how I'm facilitating this entire process. So we're not to the point where we even know what the marketplace would be, which I think we need to have before we create the mitigation strategies around them for how we have a safe failure state, or what we might do if we start to see some of the key indicators saying that
Yeah.
this isn't socially acceptable, or this isn't technically acceptable, or this isn't financially viable, right? All of those questions remain and move forward with the project as
Yeah.
we go to implement into this. And I expect that there will be a pilot, right, first, and then the pilot would get built upon into sort of an MVP, right? We know that there
Yeah.
will be 3 site templates developed. They're in development right now. That's going to exist. We may be able to do a very easy pilot version of just what does it look like? How do we present it to users? What is the contribution path? What about upgrade, updates, and how do we actually monitor those things? Like, that gives us a safe kind of sandbox to start to play in it before we get to the point where we have thousands of site templates.
Yeah.
So part of what I'm here to do is to introduce a very agile approach to how we might evolve. One of our basic community pillars, right?
Yeah.
Drupal.org, and how we might invite folks in. So, I'm a data nerd. And so I actually wrote down John's idea about why don't I go through and establish a baseline for what the module burden is and what the issue queue burden is based on growth of modern Drupal. Like, now you have me interested. Like, numbers
Mm.
and spreadsheets are my love language. So, hey, I would love to dig into that, and I probably will. So I do think we can establish a baseline, and then we can start to monitor, okay, what impact is this having on the module maintainers? And then we sense, we inspect, and then we adapt.
Yeah. One thing to add to your, sorry, John, I keep interrupting today. One thing to add to that list that I think might be interesting and not super easy to pull out maybe is a graph of release versus number of usages too, because that's the other thing too. Like, cutting a release takes is burden. Never mind just the issue queue. And I mean, I have no idea if more users means more releases, more users means less. It probably depends a little bit on the project and the maintainer, but it might be interesting to see, like, if you increase the number of releases depending on how many people are using the site as well.
But
Yeah,
Pin Lemon
that's a
does not
great
listen to
approach.
this episode. Sorry. 'Cause he's where I go to get my numbers from. So
Well, maybe if he
Um,
listens, he'll do some pre-investigation. What do you get, John?
well, I just comment on the failure case, right? Like I think from a like broader perspective, like a community growth and longevity perspective, like, I don't want to say this has to succeed because, like, that seems like a lot of pressure, but I think that, like, there are a lot of other, and Tiffany's already said this, right? There are a lot of other communities and products out there that have a marketplace that, you know, there are free options, there are paid options, right? And they're very successful. And I think that one of my biggest frustrations, and when I first heard about the marketplace, I was like, what is this thing going to look like? Because technically, Drupal.org has a theme section, and I'm not, I don't want to be disparaging to anybody, but it is not great, right? It is very developer focused. You get a theme installed, and then you're like, now what? Like, it's not. It's not what I think that the marketplace. Well, I don't think I know it's not what the marketplace is going to be, right? I think the advent of site templates is something that's very, very appealing, and a lot of other, communities. I'll use Squarespace as an example. I know everybody hates when I do that. You buy Squarespace, right? You don't necessarily pay for a theme on Squarespace, although maybe they do have some paid themes. I'm not really aware, but, like, once you buy the service, right, you have this access to these themes, and the themes come with, predefined blocks that you can put onto pages that give you an idea of how you can build your site, right? It's very, like, here you go, you're all ready to go, and you can get a website up and running, right? So I mean, I think for Drupal to have something like that is super important. And I mean, I think like worst case scenario, right? We find out that nobody wants to pay for the open source the site templates, and organizations don't want to build high quality site templates. I mean, I think we get to a place where we have a collection of 3, 10, 20, 100, right? And like maybe that's it. And like that's what you get. And like that's okay. And they're free. And okay, great, fine, wonderful. And it's just kind of like everything else, right? It's an open source community driven thing. But I mean, I think like even in that case, we're probably better off than we are now, right? But I personally like sunshine, rose colored glasses. I don't
Yeah.
think this is going to fail, because I really think it's an important growth step for the community in order to be able to see longevity into the future.
I want to clarify too something really quickly. Like, I think the the best case success scenario is some sort of paid marketplace, right? That injects much needed resources into an open source community. I think that is the best case scenario. I think that the now I think that's also the riskiest, which is, I mean, that's life. Sometimes you have to take risks, but it's different. I think it's different for a community than a company to make a venture like that and back out than for a community to start something like I said, you look at tons of initiatives across Drupal.org. Some finish, some complete, some stall, some fail, and they don't necessarily like them failing. While it's discouraging and it is a huge amount of effort that people put into it, I don't think inherently harm the community, right? Whereas I feel like there's a line in this, there's something different about this one. That's my only point. It's not that I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do it. I don't think we shouldn't try to do it. I think we're at an existential time in development in general. We need to find ways to be more sustainable. But
I mean,
there's
failure
something different about this. It feels.
failure is how we learn and grow, right? So we
Yeah.
can learn and grow from a failure. But let's
On to
shift the
happier
conversation.
topics.
Let's shift the conversation to more sunshine and less doom and gloom. We've talked about a lot of the kind of intricacies of a Drupal marketplace. We've talked about what, the working group and the initiative are working on, and again collecting the data to kind of make this decision, right? I'm wondering what like an MVP goal looks like for the working group, right? So and I'm going to kind of double up on this question a little bit. Like with that goal, what is the finished state of the working group? Is it a report that says, here's why we should have a Drupal marketplace and the data that comes behind, that we've collected and to support this? Or is it like, here's why we need the marketplace and here's how we start to build it? Like what's that MVP where you're like, okay, this work is done, or at least at a MVP plateau?
Yes, our MVP goal is to make sure that we have defined a trusted submission and review process, that we have also validated that the marketplace is going to deliver real value to end users, to contributors, and to the Drupal ecosystem. So for us, what that looks like when we're, what success looks like is that we've validated that MVP scope, what that next step looks like. Here's the shape of it. We have a couple of folks who are going to be ready to submit templates. I think that's already on track. So I love having a good goal like checked off, right? That we understand what the contribution UX might be. We understand and have, and this is really important to me, that it's a lightweight and credible governance and funding model. So we're going to continue to iterate, right? You want to in Agile, you want to take that next increment, but make it small enough that failure isn't catastrophic, right? I think we take some really big swings in Drupal, and that's kind of been our pattern. I'd really love to see us adopt a more agile approach with this, and that's part of why I'm involved in the way that I'm involved. And then none of this happens if we don't have the confidence of the ecosystem. And so, that MVP for us means, yes, we have the consent that this is good enough for now and safe enough to pilot.
Well, so question on that, and maybe this is part of your MVP deliverable, but like, do you guys see yourselves developing a 3-year, 5-year roadmap for marketplace and saying like, okay, we have all the data, we have these three that we're going to pilot, we have the cost model figured out. Here's the roadmap for the next, like I said, 3 to 5 years.
Our charter is to get to that go, no go decision. And
Mm,
so
okay,
looking out beyond that, is catnip to me as someone who loves complexity.
sure.
But I'm going to hold myself back. You asked about the marketplace working group, and that is our charter is very specific and very scoped. And what next steps come beyond that, I'm not going to speculate on right now.
Got it. Okay, so that's no, that was actually the perfect answer to my question is like, okay, your charter is basically MVP and figuring out like, yes, no,
And
let's
what's next?
here's the data and what's next. Got it.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Maybe expanding on that just a little bit, I love that you're thinking about agile, and kind of, you know, shifting some mentality here potentially as well. But, I do wonder if, and maybe related to that or not, if there's some challenges and kind of, getting this nailed down to, what that sort of shape of the MVP really is. Maybe thinking from a timeline perspective, I wonder if, you can speak to like more specifically goals on like when we're kind of goal time frame the MVP, or like at what point do we feel like we would have that good shape? I guess that's what I'm looking for here. How and maybe what challenges are around getting there.
So we're going to have a point of view on the marketplace by Vienna. So that we know. What I think is so interesting about this particular initiative is that it touches on almost every tension in open source. So I love gnarly problems and I've got one on my hands, right? So I think there's four different things here, right? So talk about the ultimate in cat herding, right? I have to align all of the stakeholders who have different goals here, right? So I've got contributors who want revenue and recognition. I have agencies who want lower cost of delivery and visibility. I have end users who are like, just let me get started with this. I don't care, right? I just want a site so I could talk about the things I want to talk about, right? And then you have the Drupal Association, which is tasked with stewarding all of this and making sure that whatever is built is actually sustainable over the long run, right? So that's one. Two, I have everybody coming in thinking that they know what a marketplace is. So I have all these different mental models that I have to reset because everybody who I talk to about the marketplace is like, we're talking about themes. And I have to reset. We're not talking about themes, right? And we're also not talking about distros either. So we've got to reset that. And I have to kind of align people to be able to talk about something that they've not yet seen because site templates are still in development. So I have to align everybody around that. And then we are operating under the constraints of the GPL. So that guarantees that anything we do is going to be distributed freely. Anything we distribute is freely modifiable, freely shareable, and then redistributable on the other side. So if I'm trying to create a business model around this, I really have to think carefully about what we sell. Why would someone pay for it? Why would they come to us? What's the value add of getting that from Drupal.org? So it's just there's a lot there. And then you have a very, very well-rounded fear of enshittification, right? So if you're not familiar with that term, it was coined by Cory Doctorow, and it describes what happens to digital platforms when they optimize aggressively for monetization in a way that erodes trust and it exploits the creators and it degrades the user experience. So there are valid concerns here around what people have seen happen in WordPress plugins or app stores or social media platforms, and everybody wants to avoid that fate, right? We want to make sure that whatever we build is something that sustains open source values rather than undermining them. So, what I have isn't a tech problem and it isn't a product problem. I have a deep cultural and structural challenge. And so that's why, as I think about the roadmap, just to get to the go no go decision and what a pilot might be, I'm thinking a lot about governance. I'm thinking a lot about trust building and trust signals at every level to every one of those stakeholder groups. And then, fortunately, I do think I have a deep understanding and of what makes Drupal unique, right? We're not looking to get rid of the things that keep us here for this community. So it's a thorny problem, and yeah,
You'll have
I've
it done by
suddenly
next Tuesday.
totally.
I've just just now realized, like, I don't understand how Tiffany's head doesn't explode. There are so many. It's one topic, but there are so many different, different buckets and things to think about. And like, I don't know, just listening to you describe that so eloquently, I'm like, yep, my brain is literally would be leaking out of my ears. So
Fortunately, this is how my brain works. This is the catnip. I think the way I like to describe it is my mind is like a MongoDB. Like it isn't structured in the same way as everyone else's, and I just make patterns from other things.
So
I will say that you're really hitting on a lot of concepts around change management and really enterprise level, something that like could spend lots of dollars on like high enterprise to implement some large changes that need to occur in large enterprise. And
mm,
the only way to do that, like you said, is getting, it's a sort of trust building and consensus and breaking it down into, categories of some kind. And I do wonder, like, just expanding a little bit on that. I do hear that there's some challenges, and specifically getting folks like to understand even what it is, the community, and or maybe some supplemental documentation or messaging at events, or like how can or do you envision that the community itself can help itself, understand what this is?
Well, there's lots of different things. I've been writing share outs regularly just to kind of keep people in the loop. And then when they find it, they can go to the marketplace page, which is drupal.org/about// marketplace dash initiative. Thanks, Scott.
we'll put a link in the show notes for folks who are listening.
Thank you. That page captures everything. It captures the survey results, it captures all the share outs, it captures the high levels, it captures what you could do next, links to all the Slack prompts, the past and current one. So, whether you have 5 minutes or 5 hours to spend on this, I want to be able to have some quick bullets for you. So go to the page, get the update on whatever it looks like today. So I think there's that. I was just at MidCamp yesterday, which was awesome. Thank you, Nora. Well done to you and all the mid camp volunteers. It's an amazing event, always is. So I did one there, doing the podcast. I've been trying to get out. I don't often post on social media, but I have been posting on LinkedIn generally every week when I do these share outs. So I'm trying to make sure that for folks who are interested, the official Drupal channels are pushing things out. All the share outs that I do go out on Planet. So I think there's lots of different ways that people can get there. But when we get to an actual lightweight governance proposal, I do expect that will be done the traditional way. Once I have a draft, I think I'll put it probably in an issue queue, and so we'll
okay.
go the official channels too. So Nate doesn't kill me.
So
Uh,
you've mentioned a couple times that there's going to be a go no go decision. Who are the stakeholders for that? I mean, obviously it's product managers and leadership, but like, do you have that list of who the go no go decision makers are?
Mhm. It's the
For
working
this?
group itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So the
does
members of the working group are Dries, Tim Lennon, Lenny, Tim Doyle, who's the CEO of the Drupal Association, and then you have the Starshot leadership is involved, Tim Plunkett, Ham, Lowry, Brian Zrama is a former community elected board rep, and then a member of the CEO of Centauro, he's involved. And then Alex Moreno, who's a community elected board
Mhm.
member right now, he's also involved. And then we compose the working group, and so we'll
Okay.
make that go no go.
Okay. Very cool.
So sorry, I don't did we ever get to like a time frame as far as when we might be out here?
Vienna.
Did I
At or
miss it?
before Vienna,
Vienna. Okay, okay. Clearly I missed
October.
that. I apologize. Wow, you guys are working pretty quick there, right? Because I imagine like I don't know. I feel like it's a lot of data, and I feel like you're doing a great job organizing it and getting it ready quickly. So that's awesome. So where you stand right now, right? How Vienna is when? Is that September?
October.
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 So you got like, I don't know, a couple of months, what, 3 or 4? I'm wondering like if you can see what MVP version of a marketplace might look like. And maybe that's a little like, hey, if you look in your crystal ball, what does this look like? But I'm wondering if you have that.
So this would just be my opinion, right?
Right.
And it is subject to
Perfect.
change. It's going to evolve as I learn more, as we learn more. This will evolve. But I think right now, some sort of an MVP would be site templates, right, which are happening regardless of the marketplace. So I think that's my tip. Some sort of page on Drupal.org, right?
Mhm.
A way to submit and review those templates for minimum standards. So there was a conversation last week. The Slack prompt was around, all right, we say we all want standards. What does that mean? Is that manual review? Is that automated review? What is it? How many different dimensions? I have a list of at least 15 different dimensions where we could evaluate code quality and accessibility. And not all of them are automatable. And so then there's a cost to that. So you're really just trying to understand what we might want to do, what might be an MVP doable, thinking a lot about trust signals. So a lot of the early surveys were asking both those who might be end users or agencies as well as those in the community, what would make you think that this is actually high quality, which is one of the criticisms of the theme listing right now
Yep.
on Drupal.org, is that
100%.
you don't know what you're going to get. So, usage statistics, which we have for modules and things. What about reviews? How do we know that they even used it? And how do we prevent slop in that space? Badges? Is there a badging system or self
Mhm.
certification? There's a lot of different things there. So, we would have some sort of minimum sense of what our trust signals are that we want to launch with. We would obviously, it's just a no brainer. We're going to have some clear contributor attribution
Mhm.
because we think it's really important that in the site templates, it's very clear not just what recipes are being used, but what modules are being used. So all of that needs to be very clear and upfront. Some sort of basic review and appeals process.
Mhm.
Hey, is it they just took my site template and republished it and are now trying to sell it? Like,
Mhm.
how do we prevent that from happening in the first place? And then how do we, if something were to slip through, how would we resolve it? So all of those things I think are essential to have in place in a lightweight way for an MVP. It could be that we only have it free initially. Monetization could come in later. Don't know. That's really a whole kettle of fish because once you have the monetization in place, then we have to deal with things like customer service and refunds. And I mean, there's just a whole host of new issues that start to come in there. So
Mhm.
I'm not I wouldn't bet that monetization is in the first round. It could be.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we're just actively working on governance, quality standards, that business model. Those three things start to really shape. And there's still so many different questions in each of those. But
Mm.
we're validating what would need to be in. What makes it worth doing. We don't want to launch the marketplace. It's kind of the inverse of what Nick was saying, where I don't want to launch a marketplace that doesn't actually create some value
Yeah.
over and above just creating a views page, right? Like it does need to be worth the time. But
Yeah.
it also, I was gonna say, it just also
Oh,
needs
yeah,
to
go ahead.
be something that doesn't. We want to make sure that whatever we do doesn't damage trust, doesn't feel
Yeah.
extractive, and doesn't burden contributors or the association or the makers unfairly.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the idea of having a marketplace of site templates as opposed to a marketplace of just themes to me feels like a huge win, right? Because my biggest, again, going back to what I said towards the beginning of the show, right? My biggest gripe with three themes right now is like you get a theme and like yes, you go to the theme page and it looks great and like hey, look at all this cool stuff and then you get the theme and it's literally like all right, content, there are no blocks, there's no real anything here that allows you to like understand how you get to what those beautiful visuals look like. And I think with Drupal CMS and the addition of Experience Builder, like we're going to need those site templates, and we're going to need a marketplace where people can easily, get them and apply them and start to use them. So I definitely think you're on the right track for what it's worth.
Well, thank you. I really what resonates with me about site templates and their potential is it's a path forward to make Drupal more accessible
Mm,
to new users in a way that doesn't reduce the complexity of Drupal. It just
mhm,
makes it so that you don't need to know it all at once, all up front to do anything with it. Because, for agencies and companies like mine
mhm.
that use Drupal and implement Drupal in very large enterprise context, it's because of the complexity that Drupal is able to handle that we love it so much, right? But not everybody's use case needs that. So I think it allows us to have our cake and eat it too, right? We want lots of people to be
Yeah.
using Drupal, but most people don't need to dive in at the deep end, which is how we pretty much force people to do right now. They want to use Drupal.
Yeah, I see it as like both an introductory and a stepping stone, right? So like it's an intro to new people to easily get onto the platform and build, you know, smaller to medium sized websites, right? But then it could also be that stepping stone of, hey, I got in, I built my medium, going back to my, my nonprofit org example, right? I get in, I say, hey Nick, I want you to apply this site template. I built the site. Okay, well, Nick, now we need more advanced features. Like, can you build us a module that integrates with our donor management system? Or can you build us, and it provides that ecosystem of growth for the greater community. So yeah, definitely very positive on it, and I think like that's definitely a great stepping stone or introduction to the wonderful world of Drupal.
Absolutely. I'm excited about that. The folks who are going to continue up that engagement ladder. It's where
Yeah.
many of us started, almost 20 years ago. You get involved and you do a little bit and then you kind of move forward. And as Drupal is the, a very mature open source product, we have we have years of accumulated history. And so it can be intimidating for somebody to just step right into that. But there are always going to be those folks who want to start simple and who find themselves as engaged as those of us who are absolutely hooked and want to find out more, want to do more, and have ambitions beyond what a starter kit could actually help them to do. And there's also going to be companies, as you say, who have more ambitious needs that go beyond it. And that creates the funnel for agencies who may not use site templates on their own, but a site comes to you and they have ambitious next round plans. And what you can trust is that the site hasn't been built poorly. And you're not going to have to say to them, I'm sorry, we need to start over from this, right? I really want it to be easier to do Drupal well for those who are just getting started.
Coming from the agency world, I'll be honest, I really am very excited about the idea of a something that is that an agency will want to put more time into to be more intentional about putting this sort of best foot forward, not just having a good profile on Drupal.org, not just being a certified partner and being exposed in that way, but like this is not maybe even more than just a case study, to be honest with you. It's a something that you can see right now that is how my organization, how my agency thinks of what a template should look like, and what we would normally do, like get the feel of like what that agency is, right? Really take that portfolio a little bit further. A lot of agencies that either have done distributions in the past before or have something similar will participate more, that we'll see more participation basically in the agency side of the world in order to attract more folks in effect to Drupal, of course. But I am wondering in that regard, maybe just to round this out in general. I know that we've talked about Drupal Slack and how people can get involved there on that channel, but also documentation. Are there any other ways that you feel like, and maybe I'm being a little bit biased here with events? I wonder, can we use our slide deck and we'll take it on tour around to other events for you? What other ideas and ways could you think of that we might be able to get involved as a community?
Well, I'm excited to have as many outreach coordinators and those who can amplify the message as possible. So if you want a deck, I'll make you a deck. Right now there's the survey share out deck. You're welcome to take that and dig into that. There's also an intro to the marketplace deck. You're welcome to take and remix. We do have the share out. So I just want people to, first of all, be up to speed that this is happening. And if it does seem like something that you want to participate more in or just follow, then, keep up to date on any of the share outs that go out on Planet. Join that conversation in Drupal Slack. It's Drupal-CMS-Marketplace channel on the Drupal Slack. Look at for the weekly prompts. They change every week. And then I summarize back what we're hearing in them. So if you're just a follower and you don't want to read the 100 messages or the the 200 messages that come in, just wait for the following week and you're going to see posted back up in, here's the summary of what we heard, right? And there's the surveys. The surveys don't take more than like 10 minutes, but they really do help us get a sense of the direction and the temperature of the community on different issues. So, as you were just saying, a lot of what we heard in one of the surveys was about the value to agencies and the value to DCPs of these site templates. And what they said, which was a little bit surprising to me and a little bit of a relief, if I'm honest, was that lead generation is actually the most important thing. That they're not really looking at these as the new business model for my business. I think that's probably wise, given what we all know it will take to do a site template really well. You're probably not going to capture it, even if we are 3 to 5 times the kind of market rate for a theme to do a starter kit. And you're not going to make that back really fast, I don't
Yeah.
think. But if you do it with some combination of, I'm going to use this for lead generation, then it may be worth it for you. There's also the real-time collaboration sessions I've been hosting. So they're participatory. One of the ways in which we work at Palantir and that I'm trained in is using liberating structures. So you've heard me talk a lot on this podcast episode. And if you come to an RTC, you should not expect to hear me talk a lot. It's about the folks who are there working together and talking and telling me. I actually prefer to be in listening mode in those RTC sessions. So our next one is coming up on Thursday, May 25th. It's at 15:30 UTC. I think that's 10:30 Chicago time, my time. And it's specifically focused on this DCP and this agency ecosystem so that we can balance tension. So come to that if you'd like.
Tiffany, when's the next one after that? Because this will be released on the 26th.
So I don't know yet. They're getting scheduled
Ah,
over time. So that's the next. So
Uh,
next Thursday is the next one. So the 29th. So if you hear this and listen to it really fast, then come and register. Otherwise, you can check the initiative page on Drupal.org to find out when the next one will be scheduled, or pop in Slack. I do post in there too. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. If you are interested in kind of taking it to the next level and being kind of an outreach coordinator and taking it to the events, we have a different channel for that, which is our volunteer channel. So you can pop in there and you're like, hey, I have an idea and this is my need. Just let us know and we'll be able to kind of support that too. So it's marketplace-volunteers in Drupal Slack.
Well, thank you, Tiffany, for joining us to talk through all this was a much more, I don't know how to word it, but this was a much tougher topic than we usually have. So I appreciate you jumping in to kind of talk through some of I'm sure you're hearing this from the community as well. So I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. I appreciate it.
do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. You can learn more at talkingdrupal.com/td promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing Become a Patron. All right, Tiffany, if people wanted to get in touch with you, had questions, comments, or feedback, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably on Drupal Slack or on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, I'm Tiffany Farriss, and on Drupal Slack, I'm at Farriss, Farriss.
Very good. And Nor, how about you?
Yeah, similarly on Slack and or LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm under Nora Medlin, and on Slack, I'm under TechNor.
John, how about you?
You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. You can also find me at picozzi.com. And if you want to find out more about EPAM, you can find us at epam.com.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. Have a good one, everyone.
See you guys next week.